I really like Enlisted. If any of you follow my channel, I'm pretty sure you can tell through the number of videos and shorts that I've made on it. In general, despite Gaijin and Darkflow's infamous history, I do like the squad-based system that the game is built upon. Unlike some people, I don't think the Enlisted merge was an absolute mistake, nor do I think the old campaign system was better, although I would be lying if I said that Enlisted's current direction is anywhere near sustainable. Why would I be saying this? I know Enlisted already gets its fair share of criticism from the forums, but regardless of the many existing problems in the game, whether it be bugs, optimization, balancing, try not to queue into Heilongjiang for the 6th match in a row as Japan, whether the campaign system was better, I don't actually think any of these are the big issue with Enlisted as bad as they are. As you can probably tell from the title and the thumbnail, Enlisted's current issue is how simply unsustainable the development path is. I'm not saying that the current development path is horrible, but it isn't making full use of Enlisted's sandbox potential. And because of that, I don't think the game as it is currently will grow the player base nearly as much as it could. Here's the issue simplified. The Enlisted updates model doesn't meaningfully expand the game. It feels like every single update is just some flavor of, oh look, we added some new weapons, maybe even a tank or a plane if we're lucky, and we changed the battle rating of another weapon, and, following in Darkflow's current model, we'll sprinkle in 2 maps every year as well. Here's the truth, it's not enough. So let's go through exactly why this isn't just unsustainable, but also wastes Enlisted's potential. Starting with, Enlisted is, unsurprisingly, a game about World War II, and should naturally cover World War II battlegrounds. I'll actually give this to Enlisted. Compared to most games like Call of Duty or Hell Let Loose, even Squad 44, Enlisted covers a very wide array of battlegrounds. How many games out there can you say cover the Burma campaign, the Manchurian Front, as ass as the Heilongjiang map itself is, or Rzhev? As great and as diverse as the maps we get are, the glaring issue is that we only get 2 of them a year. Don't get me wrong, especially now these 2 maps we get a year are actually great. I love the new Omaha and Seoul beach maps they added. They let me have all the Band of Brothers and Saving Private Ryan moments that I want, but let this sink in. The next time we're probably going to get another map is in December. That's Christmas. And sure, maybe other games come out with new maps slower, but if Enlisted has already shown that they can make good maps, and is known for how visually stunning the game can be, choosing not to add more battlegrounds is such a wasted opportunity. Especially given how, to be honest, subpar the updates without maps are. Sure, we get new weapons, maybe even a new soldier class behind an event if we're lucky, but let's be honest, how much is your gameplay cycle really going to change if they add like 1 new plane, or one new gun to nation's tech tree, or if they add another prototype weapon that definitely existed to Japan's tech tree that nobody's going to use? I'd say what makes Enlisted interesting is its AI squad system and its variety of maps. Adding new weapons to the tech tree isn't going to cut it for the majority of the player base, especially seeing as how most of the, iconic weapons of each faction have been added already. Naturally, the devs now have to turn to prototype or niche weaponry if they want to add more stuff, which, being more obscure, simply isn't going to be used as much because they don't have that popular World War II mainstream appeal. Some prototype weapons are cool, and some players definitely use them, and I'm not against the idea of adding them. But if this is all that updates amount to, people will stop turning to the game because the experience behind each update without a map doesn't change that much, if at all, if you don't use the new weapons. A way to substantially improve Enlisted is to provide the players with new environments that requires new tactics and provide new atmospheres and historical experiences to play on. The current Enlisted gameplay cycle of storming the objective and getting all your AI soldiers gunned down isn't a bad one. And adding new maps is a logical way to enhance or evolve that experience, especially if, to be honest, all new weapons just a new flavor of bolt action, semi-auto or full auto/explosive spam. It's not like there aren't even any maps or battlegrounds to choose from. Between the 4 factions that already exist in the game, there are still so many potential options. I believe adding Saipan, the battles of Monte Cassino, Kursk, the Battle of Manila, or Khalkhin Gol will not only diversify the game, but provide historically unique and gameplay-wise interesting experiences for the players. Unlike Heilongjiang, Manila can be like a fully urban environment with tropical elements for the Pacific Front, with classical 1940s European buildings alongside traditional Filipino structures. Saipan could finally give us dense Pacific jungle combat instead of another Guadalcanal village, but with palm trees in the background. Monte Cassino can have steep mountainous terrain with verticality, while Khalkhin Gol and Kursk would force the players to fight on flatter terrain, but with wide trench networks, because Enlisted players apparently really like trench warfare. Hell, Enlisted has been out for so long, and we still don't have Okinawa or Iwo Jima. outside of mods, and that's not even scratching the surface of potential maps. Now I understand that it may sound like I'm asking the developers to just add more maps, while I myself make no maps and have no idea of what the Herculean effort behind making one is. Which is true, but from a player's perspective, I'd much rather see more development go towards new battlegrounds than another niche weapon. This isn't me calling the developers lazy or ineffective. I simply am saying that we need more allocation of development to be put towards maps to ensure Enlisted can attract more players. We mostly have the famous weapons used by the factions in the game, and we should focus now more so on the factions themselves and their battlegrounds, which brings me to... Now let me get one thing immediately clear. The campaign system was not good and probably wore off more players that it drew in. To be honest, I don't want the campaign system back. It had some strengths, especially historical accuracy, but it spread the player base thin across tiny isolated pockets of campaign matchmaking, and the grind was absolutely atrocious. With that being said, I don't like the new nations system in Enlisted either, at least in its current form. Compared to the old campaign system, the new nations system had the benefit of concentrating the player base so that you could actually have real players in your match after queuing instead of playing against bots on unpopular campaigns, as all players of the same nation were put in the same matchmaking pool, granted you were in the same BR bracket. Speaking of which, the BR system after the Enlisted merge is also a lot better for balance. If you actually use the BR system correctly, it's essentially impossible to get BR 4 to 5 full auto spam as long as you were playing on the lower BRs. The merge also dramatically cut down on the genuinely dreadful amount that you had to grind compared to the previous campaign system, where you would grind hours and hours to get, say, I don't know, the MP40, just have to do it again when you wanted to play on another campaign with it. Admittedly, what the 4 nation system does not do is open up new potential opportunities to represent minor or lesser known countries or factions of World War II, with potentially incredibly interesting history and battles. Here's the issue simplified. The current 4 nation system heavily restricts the potential additions to the game via updates because essentially everything added to the game has to somehow fit into the current 4 nations framework. Not only does this make other Axis nations weapons make less sense in singular tech trees, it also erodes the German tech tree identity because instead of having, I guess, a focused tech tree, it's just a mishmash of whatever's filed under each nation by technicality. All of what I mentioned, despite being problems, pale in comparison to the biggest issues behind the 4 nation system. It doesn't allow you to add any more factions or represent other conflicts during World War II. Be honest, what would sound more interesting? If we got another battlefield between Germany and the USA, or something like a Winter War map with a Finnish faction. If Enlisted adds more factions to the game, complete with their own voice lines, not only would it create more distinct factions and faction identities, thus making Enlisted more interesting, it would also open up the possibility for adding new battlegrounds and theatres of war to the game. This could begin by splitting Britain and Italy into their own factions, which is something many players have wanted for years. It may take a while to balance everything in the American tech tree, with many British weapons being taken away if we do this, but seeing as Enlisted isn't afraid to add prototype weaponry to the game, I think naturally those slots in the American tech tree that used to be filled up with British weaponry will gradually be filled back in via American alternatives, and vice versa for, Germany and Italy, with this being better for the game's long-term health overall. But why stop there? Even if the British and Italians were split from the American and German tech trees, realistically they would be in the same matchmaker. This is why I believe the addition of more factions, respectively the Polish, Greek, Finnish, Hungarian, Chinese, and maybe the French, would be beneficial. Now, despite the potential problems the addition of these factions might create, which I will address later on, think of all the potential new content that these factions could add. And I don't just mean slop content, but genuinely interesting and historically fascinating content. We could have the German and Soviet invasion of Poland, the Winter War, and I know there's a lot of Winter War fans in the Enlisted community, the Greco-Italian War and subsequent German invasion of Greece, Hungarian troops fighting alongside Germans in Budapest, and my personal favorite, the Second Sino-Japanese War. How about this? Imagine, instead of defending Normandy for the 10th time in a row as the Germans, instead, you were defending your position in the Italian mountains in like a Monte Cassino map, while Polish and French soldiers, who did fight at the Battle of Monte Cassino, tried to storm your position. Imagine having your Finnish Winter War moment against Soviet tank formations in a mostly nature-based snowy map, or defending Sihan Warehouse against the Japanese forces while having your 800 moment. Adding more factions isn't just about keeping the game alive, it's about drawing more players in by providing interesting and memorable play experiences. I'm not sure how many of you have heard of Easy Red 2, which I do play. Now, Easy Red 2 does have many pitfalls in my opinion, but one thing Easy Red 2 does fantastic, which I wish Enlisted could learn from, is its willingness to adapt these lesser known, but equally, if not more interesting fronts and theatres of war. People are always saying when or whether Enlisted should move into the Cold War, but in my opinion, that's a bit of a silly question to ask, seeing as Enlisted hasn't even covered everything in World War II yet. Now, I will address the elephant in the room, or I guess elephants, because I understand that this concept will have a lot of potential issues. First, probably the biggest issue, is how is the player base possibly going to be split well across these factions without leaving empty matches? I think the answer to that question has, in all honesty, already been solved by moving away from the campaign system. The campaign system had empty games because, simply put, the player base wasn't put into overlapping matchmaking. For this new faction system, naturally some factions will have disproportionate player numbers, but I don't think that's a problem. Say for example, a Chinese faction is added. Naturally, the strain on the Japanese player base will be more, but think of it like this. Due to the influx of Chinese faction players, more of the Japanese player base will be allocated towards the Chinese front. But this won't disturb the overall matchmaking, however, as 1. Japan won't be lacking enemies as they can fight China, but 2. Soviet players and American players don't suddenly have empty matches, as more of their games will be directed towards other factions such as Italy or Germany. Empty matches aren't created because the matchmaking will simply allocate players to a faction which the players playing needs them. The issue with the old campaign system was not that the player base was more split, it was that the player base was split into completely isolated pockets of matchmaking. This issue can also be further avoided if the developers follow the principle of shared matchmaking, where factions don't fight only with those of the same faction. The second issue is regarding the battle rating allocation of each faction's tech tree. A lot of you are probably correct in pointing out that if we added Chinese, Greek, and Polish tech trees, a lot of their weaponry will most likely land in the BR 1 to 3 brackets with little or maybe even no weapons in BR 4 and higher. However, I believe that not every nation needs to go up to BR 4 and 5 and shouldn't rely on copy-pasting weapons from other tech trees to make it work. Not only does this maintain faction identity, historical accuracy can also be preserved as factions are less dependent on high-tier prototype weaponry. High BR with prototype weaponry can be a possible option for these factions, although I struggle to think of what weaponry could even constitute this, or even if there's an incentive for high BR for some factions. Although not ideal, factions lacking weapons in BR 4 and 5 being a possible downside to adding more factions overall, I feel is a downside worth bearing, as the addition of more nations will help the game. Third issue. Faction identity could be lost if we add more factions, as many nations in the game would, as they did in real life, use overlapping weaponry. I believe this issue, however, comes more from a misunderstanding of what faction identity is meant to be. Faction identity isn't the uniqueness of a faction's weapons, but rather what makes a faction recognizable as that faction, when considering all aspects of it as a whole, and the image associated with that faction. Therefore, something like Chinese soldiers using Czech ZB-26s isn't something that breaks the Chinese faction identity, as the ZB-26 was in fact something the Chinese used and is known for. Same thing with the Finnish using Panzerfausts. Sure, the Panzerfaust is a German weapon, but the Finnish use them very effectively and are known for it. Therefore, the German Panzerfaust does form part of the Finnish faction identity. This same line of thinking, I believe, applies to many other weapons as well. The overall in the game currently being in the Japanese tech tree breaks the Japanese faction identity, not because the overall is a German weapon, but because the Japanese just did not use the overall at all. They simply weren't known for it. It's in my honest opinion a bit of a lazy solution to the Japanese BR4 anti-tank gap. Therefore, I believe the addition of more factions would be beneficial to Enlisted's long-term health in drawing more players in, as Enlisted would provide more unique player experiences through the addition of these factions, and it gives the devs opportunities to create more premium squads because yes, Enlisted is still a business, and the devs do need a way to monetize it. However, despite all this, Enlisted's current update model still suffers from many problems, albeit small ones, such as the Enlisted gameplay cycle is pretty fun. Games are meant to be fun, but fun alone isn't enough to keep players coming back. Games like Enlisted need ways to ensure that players keep returning, and the way Enlisted currently does this is mostly through events. I'm going to be honest for a moment. I don't think events that reward players with weapons or vehicle skins are inherently bad. It's a way to give the player base something to discuss, something to focus on, such as completing the event tasks, and a way to introduce niche or specialized weaponry that may not fit in the tech tree. What is bad, however, is when Enlisted, like it is currently, basically relies solely on events for player retention. If events are constantly running and you want the rewards, you're effectively forced to keep playing. That's understandable. After all, you have to play the game to get the stuff in the game. But most people have school, work, or other games. Eventually, logging in every couple of days to complete the next task starts feeling less like playing a game and more like clocking in for work, especially when the event itself doesn't actually change the gameplay cycle. It doesn't help that most of the rewards are simply put, slop without much substance. Everything is just either a reskin of an existing weapon class in the game, and the generally good stuff in events are few and far between, and tend to be in the 20th step marathons, which make getting the good rewards extremely difficult or even downright impossible for players with jobs or school. What's frustrating about these slop events is that despite all the quote-unquote rewards that players get, we never get anything that's genuinely interesting or is often requested by the player base. We never get anything memorable. How about instead of adding just another weapon, we added something small, but interesting, and some unique features as well? How about features actually wanted by the player base, such as the ability to have female Soviet soldiers in your squads without pay like their medic squad, or the ability to have radio operators use shotguns? Those examples I gave may sound nitpicky and like small issues, but if anything, that's what makes them frustrating. These easy to add features that will make the game more interesting instead are overshadowed by the usual slop we get. Enlisted is already fun. It just needs to stop producing filler and start adding features that genuinely improve the experience. That's what will keep existing players around and attract new ones. Now I know this video may sound a bit pessimistic, especially with how much I complained. To be fair, a lot of the Enlisted player base is frustrated as well. But if anything, I think that's actually a great thing. Complaints, although not fun to hear, show one thing. People still care about the game. If Enlisted really was unplayable or unfun or just not a worthwhile experience, the conversation around this game would have ended a long time ago. The fact that people still discuss this game shows that people have hopes and they have expectations for Enlisted. It shows that they're willing to make suggestions that will allow this game to survive long term, because they, like me, love playing Enlisted. If they really didn't care, we'd all have just left the game by now. So, to the Enlisted devs, you all have an amazing game here. Please don't let it go to waste. The complaints show that we, despite Enlisted's infamous history, whether it be the Steam release or the gold boxes, still care. We want this game to grow as well.